Welcome to Photoactive, a podcast about photography and technology. I'm Kirk McElhearn.
And I'm Jeff Carlson.
You can find show notes, including any photos we discuss in this episode, at photoactive.co. That's photoactive.co. I want to start this episode with an axiom. Remember axioms in math?
Yes.
It is a statement that you consider to be true from which other statements derive.
Yes.
My axiom is that Apple's camera app is a hot mess.
Oh, coming in hot on the podcast today.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Today, as we teased in our previous episode, we're talking about Photographic Styles, this new thing in the camera app that lets you do things. But I want to go through just quickly the three elements that make this a hot mess. First of all, we were even discussing off the air last episode about the various formats and how many formats there are and how confusing it is for the different formats. And this is in the settings, not in the camera app, but it influences the camera app. And I think there's way too much and it's way too confusing. And what is JPEG XL? And why do I have to use height for hike or whatever? And it's too confusing for most people. The second thing is this camera control, which we discussed the last episode as well, which I find incredibly confusing, and I'll probably never use it. And the third is Photographic Styles. While I applaud Apple's attempt to provide something that gives you more flexibility over in-camera shooting, other than the 7 or 8 filters that they had previously, I think this is just a hot mini mess. The Photographic Styles on their own. But together, this combines to a hot mess. Can you imagine normal people who've never used a real camera looking at this stuff and trying to figure out what to do? They'll never change the settings. They'll never use Photographic Styles. They won't use the camera control except for Apple Visual Intelligence when that happens, because remember, it doubles as a trigger for that. Mm-hmm. But what have they done? Jeff?
Make it make sense.
It's not that. It's not that. You think of a flow chart, right? And as you get to your first decision and other decisions branch. And if you were to flow chart this out of the settings and the operation of the camera app, you would have a flow chart that would be infinite.
Yeah. Okay. So starting on a couple of different things. I think that the key to this is to remember, and you already touched on it, normal people who are shooting, I think they probably will ignore most of this. And it's set up so that you can ignore most of it. They might try Photographic Styles, or maybe they'll play around with a photographic style, find what they like, and leave it there. Or
accidentally tap something that brings it up and not know what to do when that happens.
Well, yeah, that is also an issue. But I think the idea of the iPhone camera app has always been, it's got to be something that will make good photos for most of the people. And most of the people, numbers in the tens or hundreds of millions. So from that point of view, I think it works about as well as it has, in that there's a lot of other stuff in the app. Most of it you can probably ignore, because if you are just an average person who got the latest phone because it was time to upgrade your phone, then you can just pick it up and you can take a picture. And hey, isn't it cool that you can now push this new button on the side to launch the camera, and then you push it again and you take a picture. And yay, that's great. So I'm happy to defend that as the perfectly acceptable possibility for someone who just wants to take pictures, wants the phone to figure it out for them, and that's great. And then we go one notch further, which is intermediate and people who are into photography. And this is where things have gotten a lot more complicated, maybe spiraled out of control a little bit, but you can see the two forces competing within Apple, within all of the other camera apps, Android phones and all of that, which is these phones have become the main cameras for a lot of people, even a lot of people who are into photography. So how can we give them more control? So I think Photographic Styles specifically is trying to do a lot of things. And I think that's why we're coming at it with the idea of this is kind of a mess. This is confusing. If you spend a little bit of time, it makes more sense. But it's that problem of either having a situation where you're not interested in having choices because you just want the camera to do the best thing for you. Like you're shooting on auto all the time, and that's great. And that's fighting with an experienced photographer who knows what they're doing and wants to tweak things and wants to get things in camera, doesn't necessarily want to go and edit things later. They know that they can shoot in RAW. They don't want to. They just want it to look the way they want it to look. So once you open that door, then there are all sorts of different considerations. And I think that's what we're seeing now, which is Apple saying, look, you want options? We're going to give you options. And we're going to build it into this thing called Photographic Styles, which is actually doing 4 different things at once. And I think they've tried to make it seem very simple, and it can be – what's a good way of saying this? It can be simple once you wrap your head around it, but wrapping your head around it takes a bit of work, and it takes a bit of conceptualizing. You're not just saying, okay, I know how to take a picture. I need my shutter speed to be this and my aperture to be this and my ISO to be this. It's more of, okay, how do I want my skin tones to appear? I don't like the way the camera is bringing up all the shadows, so I want to compensate for that. But how do I do that?
But there's only one. It's not even a slider. What would you call it? Like a joystick that you can move around in this thing. It's, what is it, about 10 by 10 point grid, and you can only move the one thing. You can't have multiples. So you can't adjust contrast and color at the same time. You've only got one adjustment within it. Now, they're calling it tone and color. So I'm not sure exactly. Tone is dark and light. I guess color is from reddish orange to bluish, right? That's generally the thing. One of the problems I have is that there are 15 photographic styles, standard, which would be without a photographic style, and 14 others. But they have names like cool rose and gold and amber and vibrant and luminous, which don't really say that much. And which of them is going to make skin tones more realistic? And which of them is going to, I don't know, provide a more accurate sky, a blue sky against trees? It's the fall in your area. You have trees turning colors. Which is going to provide the colors like that? I think I'm coming to this, and maybe a lot of people are, from the term you used last time, recipes or film simulations or presets or whatever that cameras have that aren't just like leaning on one element. Gold, it kind of just enhances the gold and nothing else. I know the Fujifilm film simulation is better than other cameras, but each one is trying to emulate a film stock with alterations in color, in contrast, potentially in grain, etc. Here it doesn't look like that. And it seems like what they did is they just doubled the number of filters they had before and added that little joystick slider. I don't know, what do you know what that's called? The actual interface element?
No, I don't know what it's actually called. It's the Photographic Styles control.
Right. I will say the one interesting thing is that you can shoot a photo in the camera. And can you do this on 18.0? Or is it the .1 that does this? You can then go into the Photos app and edit the photographic style.
No, that's
actually
18.0.
useful. So that's an 18.0. Okay. Or 15.0 or whatever it is. That's actually interesting because then you don't have to think about the photographic style until you get to the editing point.
Right. So let me back up real quick and set some parameters here for people. First of all, we need to mention that these photographic styles, and this also drives me crazy about Apple. If you have an iPhone 15 or earlier, you probably have photographic styles, but these are not those photographic styles. So it was a different thing, and I'm sure we talked about it probably. So wait,
this is only on the 16?
Only on the 16 and the 16 Pro is this more advanced photographic styles. Now, as far as I could tell, well, I was about to say there's no good reason for this not to be on the 15, but then I actually saw a post on Threads last night where Sebastian DeWitt, who is one of the developers of Halide, someone brought that up, and he said that actually the image pipeline is different in the 16. They've changed it both software and hardware, so you couldn't just graft this onto the 15. But going back to my main point, here we have something that is a completely different thing with the same name as before. So it will only apply to the 16 or 16 Pro. So set that
So if you don't have a
aside.
16 or 16 Pro, you can stop listening to this episode and join us next time.
No. Continue listening because they will get your witty banter and my good looks. Oh, no, this is radio. So
And maybe they'll be tempted to buy an iPhone 16 or 16 Pro when they hear about how this works.
yes, they're going to be really inspired to do it by our curmudgeonly take.
Well, I think I'm more curmudgeonly than you on this, but how about you go through an explanation of how this works?
Okay, so it's on the 16s. The next part of this is that, and again, this is sowing more confusion. Thank you, Apple. When you're looking at the different styles, and there are about say, I don't know, a dozen or so.
15.
Those are 15. Okay, when you're looking at all of these, they're actually split into two different categories, and it's not really clear how that is. And when you're using the phone, it's actually split sort of left and right. So you have standard, which is basically what the phone is going to see and how it's going to process it. Everything to the left, so you have things like amber and gold and rose gold and neutral. Those are basically styles that you can tweak so that you're making something maybe a little bit warmer. So, for example, the amber style tends to be a little bit warmer than the standard style if you just want to have like a general warmth boost. Okay. The ones
Well, I think it's worth pointing out that Apple names these two categories differently. To the left, they're called undertones, and to the right, they're called moods.
Oh, yes.
I mean, these are terms that have been used in photography since 1836, so I don't think anyone needs an explanation of these.
Okay, but what I found confusing is that
that was sarcastic. I have no idea what they mean by undertones and moods.
Okay. Well, so basically, the ones to the left, the undertones are I guess more subtle changes that you can have control over. The ones to the right are basically presets. So before we had filters, and again, like if you have a 15 or 15 plus and earlier, you still have those filters. And we've talked about this before. There are like 5 or 6 filters that have been there since forever. Well, now those are gone. And so the photographic styles to the right, those are now the filters that you have more control over. So if you want something to be black and white, there's a stark black and white mood filter thing that's actually really pretty cool. But what's nice is you can change that if you want it to be less stark, but not like a sort of a flat monochrome.
Or more stark.
Or more
in fact,
stark.
I'll send you a photo via messages that we'll put in the show notes that I took. And I actually like, that's the only one that I really like.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to do that sort of relatively high contrast black and white, but without the feeling that it's Apple's black and white, which has never really pleased me. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I've always tweaked Apple's black and white from color, right? Instead of using their filter.
Right.
So
right.
photos crashed on me, so I'm resending you the photo here. And this is a
Okay.
photo of Notre Dame Cathedral that I took today.
All right. First of all, we mentioned this before. That is awesome. And second of all, you
yes, it is the Lego Notre Dame Cathedral.
It's the
which is
Lego
on my
Notre Dame.
desk.
Yeah. I was actually hoping we'd see that all put together. But anyway, yes, you're right. What you did there is you made the stark black and white and then adjusted it. Is that what you said?
Yep. Yeah. I tweaked the slider. Let me see how much. I tweaked the slider a little bit to the lower left. Now, since one axis on the slider is color, it doesn't really make that much of a difference.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes a little bit of a difference in the same way that when you drag the slider for black and white conversions in Apple Photos, it alters the darkness of the various colors.
Yes.
So it does make a little bit of a difference.
Exactly. So I will also point out here that the very, very cool aspect of photographic styles, and this was not the case before, is that you can go and change them later in the Photos app. And actually, if you do it.
You could change filters later in the Photos app before.
You could change
apply those
filters, but
you couldn't edit them at all.
Well,
you couldn't modify the filters.
Sorry, the filters, yes, but if you had applied a photographic style, the old kind of photographic style, then you couldn't do anything about it. Like that got burned into your image. And so if you had something that was, nice and ethereal or whatever, then that's just how it would be. And now you can go back in and say, I like luminous, but it's too purple. So instead I'm going to go mess with that. And I'll also point out that when you're working with these, the editing interface on the phone isn't bad, but especially for photographic styles, in the Photos app, you get this giant grid pad, basically giant version of this photographic styles control in the top right corner of your editing interface. You can really see better how this works than the little tiny one on the phone.
Well, I'm looking at the phone for that same photo. I don't see any way to access photographic styles.
Okay, so if we open an image, and also important to mention, you cannot be shooting in RAW. If you're shooting in RAW,
it's the same photo.
It doesn't apply.
I said earlier it has to be high for Heek or whatever.
Right, and so then if we go to edit, you should see a styles button at the bottom.
I have adjust and crop, and these are the standard adjustment options that I've always had on the phone.
Oh wait,
I see.
You don't have styles, adjust, and crop?
No. That's why I asked if this was 18.0 or 18.1, because my phone is on 18.0 and my iMac is on 18.1.
Huh.
But if I take a photo in the camera app, I can bring up the photographic styles thing. I'm going to just take a photo of my desk.
Yeah.
And I'm going to choose that same black and white mood. Do mood, stark black and white, and then I'm going to shoot the photo. And now I've got the photo. And if I go to edit it, now I see the styles. So why did I not? Maybe because I've edited on the iMac, I can't do a return trip edit to the. That wouldn't make sense.
That wouldn't make sense, but it could be a beta weirdness.
Because I'm on 18.1 on my Mac, or I'm on .1 on my Mac.
Yeah.
So that could just be an outlier. Okay.
Yeah, it could be.
Okay. Well, what I mean is that I'm running a beta on the Mac of the .1 release because it has Apple Intelligence features instead of the .0, which is on my phone. So,
yeah.
Okay.
What? Even more confusion? Sure, let's bring it.
Well, running the betas leads to confusion at times.
It leads to confusion, and it's something we just have to deal with.
Okay, so basically when you take a photo, you can adjust the style afterwards. So it's almost like there's no point in choosing a style when you're shooting then.
What's nice is you have that raw capability of being able to change all sorts of things. I think the point of doing this is so that you can capture things in camera and not have to edit it. So one of the big criticisms of iPhone photography and Android is that the computational photography has made it so that it can really bring out detail in shadows, right? Or if you have a really bright scene, it does its image analysis and it stacks a whole bunch of exposures so that what you get is a more balanced image. So you have detail in the shadows, you have detail in the highlights, you see a broader dynamic range. The problem is those often come out.
The problem is that images like that are bland.
They're bland. They come out kind of flat, a little bit gray. Sometimes that's fine, but you don't really have that rich darkness, right? Shadows should be dark sometimes. And what this can let you do is you say, I am tired of the iPhone always looking bland. So you can set the tone of your images to be slightly darker. So this isn't quite like doing Halide's Process Zero, but it's sort of in the same idea in that you have more control over saying, look, I want all of my images to be slightly darker, slightly richer. And then you also have the capability to edit those later if you want. But I think so much of this is I want my pictures to be like this when I take them. It's not overriding the computational photography. It's like another part of the process. Is that making sense?
I guess it is. And what's interesting is that the files that are used for this, the HEIF or HEIC, how are we supposed to say it? HEIF?
I've heard HEIF.
Okay. The HEIF files are actually a lot larger than normal HEIF files without photographic styles, I believe, which still is only a few megabytes.
Oh, that's interesting.
But I have read that the files are larger.
That surprises me a little bit because I would think that this is just setting some numbers.
Maybe it's lots of numbers.
It's a lot of numbers. Yeah, exactly.
Well, maybe it's lots of numbers for each pixel.
It could be
possible.
Yeah.
Could be something like that.
It could be.
One of the things I don't like about it is that you can only choose from the 15 photographic styles and adjust them. You can't say, I want to create 3 photographic styles that I want to choose. I want to take the default and the black and white and the whatever, amber, whatever, modify them and have those 3 be my options. And you can't do that. You have to manually adjust each one. And I don't want 15 styles. I don't want to go through the thing and have 15. I want to say, these are the ones I want to use, and I want to adjust them like that. And I think it's, of course, that'll be next year's feature to get people to buy the iPhone 17.
Yeah.
But I think they kind of missed a beat here that people, you see the popularity of filters and presets and all that, and people do want to have that one particular look, right? A lot of people like that old analog type look with a high black point and contrast and everything. And they want to have the Visco filters do that. And I think there should be a possibility to say, well, I want 3 different versions of the black and white or 3 different versions of the natural, but you can't do that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the closest that you can do with that is you pick 3, like let's say standard and amber and gold, because they're next to each other. And you customize those. And then when you come back to them, like those are the ones that you do. The question that I have though is,
do the alterations remain? I believe they do, and that's something that's in the settings for the camera app where you choose your photographic style. So you choose a default photographic style in the settings for the camera app. That's one thing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem that it always sort of defaults to that, if you know what I mean. Like I chose my black and white, but it's not defaulting to the black and white when I open the camera app.
Yes, although I think that is in the camera settings, you have your app settings for photographic styles, and you can specify the photographic style that you want to use by default is gold, for example. But then there's also the preserve settings, and
that's what it is. Yeah.
So under preserve settings, you have photographic style that preserves the last used photographic style rather than automatically reset. And I believe that is set off by default. So that would be something that you want to be on.
Yeah. And here's an example in preserve settings: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 settings to preserve.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's a whole lot. What I don't quite understand to try to address your specific request is, let's say I want 3 standards. I want standard 1, standard 2, standard 3.
Right.
One is darker, one is sort of more washed out, and one is more vibrant. But I don't want the vibrant mood. That's not what I'm looking for. And what I think would be the solution is you set standard and amber and gold, which are next to each other, and you customize those to get the look that you want. However, I don't think all of them are equal in terms of like their base settings.
Yeah.
And so when
and
you
how
go
much
to
they
amber,
change the images.
Yeah, so amber and gold are going to be warmer whether you like it or not. And I don't think you could make amber look like standard or make standard look like amber.
I think the best way to look at this is to do it in the Photos app on the Mac. And when you select a photographic style, you'll see that little pad up in the top right change in the tinges of the colors around the corner. So when you go to say rose gold, you'll see up in the top right, it's a rose gold. And then when you go to gold, it's a yellow or gold, and amber, it's more of a yellow, and vibrant, it's like a combination of red and green, etc. So that gives you a better idea of the type of colors. One other thing to point out is when you've changed any of these photographic styles, and I can't see this in my phone, but you can confirm, there's a slider to adjust how much the photographic style affects the image.
Right. Right. There's also that.
So so there's another variable in there.
Yeah. So it's like the percentage of how much it is applied. Yeah.
Well, it's not, because again, I'm looking at my photo in stark black and white. I guess at 0, there's less contrast, and at 100, there's more contrast. And so you find something in the middle that you like. And it's the same with all of them, that they have options for settings to adjust the influence of the filter on the photos. Probably the best way to say it.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Actually, that seems to be the implementation of that adjustment control that's still on the Mac under the adjust settings, where instead of just having the sliders, you have a little preview, and it's a slider that will give you different variations of, say, black and white. And as you move it, like different tones are darker or lighter. This seems to be like maybe the iPhone's version of something like that. But see, I listened to us.
We've been doing this for half an hour, and we still haven't made an easy way to describe the many variables in these photographic styles.
Yeah, which I think goes right back to what you've said, is that, yeah, this is very confusing. I think it's ultimately, I'm going to be more optimistic, because if you take the time to play with it, I think you can find something that you like. I think you can have more control over what it's doing, but you have to want to do that. And I think a lot of people aren't going to. And I think a lot of people, I mean, maybe this is why they have a bunch of these filters, which is, look, you want something to be a little bit warmer, choose amber. If you want something to be even warmer than that, choose gold. And if you want to adjust from there, you can, but you don't have to. And there's always the possibility that you can do more when you're editing later, if you want to, understanding that a lot of people just aren't going to.
And don't forget that the other variable that comes in is, after you've chosen a photographic style, you go to the Adjust tab, and you can change everything there. You can change the saturation and the exposure and the contrast and everything. So you have even more options.
Even more
on
options.
top of the photographic styles.
One of the things that I don't quite know yet, and I haven't, I thought I'd played with this a lot. Obviously, I haven't. But if you have, say, the gold photographic style because you want things to be warmer, is that changing your white balance? I don't think so. So I think the photographic style is like an overlay on your adjustments. I don't think it's making an adjustment.
It's a filter on top of your adjustments. That would make sense.
I believe so, yeah. There's even more alchemy as to whether or not you are negating your photographic style or enhancing it when you go in to adjust. But I think the reasoning there is, look, if you're going to go in and adjust sliders, then go crazy. Yeah.
But then you're probably not going to use photographic styles.
Yeah.
Photographic styles are more for straight out of camera.
Yes.
And other adjustments are more for people who want to tweak things and move sliders. And
yeah. We've nailed it.
Okay.
No,
well,
it's...
I mean, I'll return to what I said earlier. It's a hot mess. It's way too confusing. I mean, any normal camera, yes, menus are confusing on every single camera, and there are a lot of settings. But the settings don't affect the pictures as much. The settings affect your focus mode and whether a flash is used or things like that. Other than the settings for film simulations, recipes, presets, or whatever, they don't really affect the resulting image the same way. Whereas here, there's a lot of settings that affect the resulting image. And here's the other thing, that Apple controlling the software and hardware is giving you these options both in hardware when you shoot and in software afterwards, which goes beyond what other cameras do, because there's no Nikon photo editing app or Fujifilm photo editing app. Yes, there is. It's a basic one.
Yeah.
But the idea is not that the image pipeline from a real camera gets carried through to the image editing software, because they assume that you're using one of a dozen different editing apps, like 90% Lightroom and 10% whatever else the rest is. Whereas Apple is trying to, I don't want to say they're trying to control, but they're trying to offer a pathway from photograph to editing.
Yes. Yes. And have the consistency of controls that are going to work throughout that whole pathway. But yeah, I mean, I do believe that if you have an iPhone 16 and you dig into this and you experiment, then you can come up with some things that you like. But I think it's going to take work. This isn't just a first day, I'm going to get these amazing results, because it's complicated. There's a lot going on.
It is. And one thing I don't see is the ability to decide on the photographic style that you want to use and what the settings are on the Mac, and then send that to the iPhone.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't think that
would be practical. Now, I assume you can just use copy adjustments or whatever and paste adjustments on the photo, but it would be nice for you to be able to set your default on the Mac and let the iPhone pick up that default from Photos or something that have been tweaked.
Yeah. Also, one more thing to mention is that when you go to Photographic Styles in the settings, it runs you through this little wizard, I guess, that asks you to pick some images, pick 4 images that you've shot with that camera that you like, and then it will synthesize those and give you a customized photographic style. So your standard style might be a little bit darker or a little bit more saturated based on images that you've shot. It's a neat idea, but it seems like a weird implementation of, if you've been using photographic styles and you go to that menu item in settings, it like runs you through the little wizard again. So it seems like something that Apple came up with, said, oh, that's a little too cumbersome, we're going to bury it here. And if you run into it, then it might help. But I've done it once or twice. It didn't seem to do a whole lot for me. So,
Well, since I don't particularly want to shoot in HEIF, I had to go through this process every time I wanted to switch to HEIF. And so I just took photos in my office. So it's not like photos I like, because I don't have 1,000 photos I like shot in that format. And they don't explain that you won't find any if you don't have any in that format.
Yeah.
They're just assuming that no one's changed that setting, even though they're telling you can shoot in ProRAW and JPEG XL and all the other settings.
Yeah.
And that flow chart, it's gotten bigger again there once you get to there.
Yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to updating my Take Control of iPhone Photography book, because I thought that it was going to be a minor update this year, and now I'm like, oh God, this is going to take a lot of explanation. So, but that's what Take Control books are for. By the way, we both have Take Control books. Go buy them.
Yes, we both have Take Control books, and I'm updating one of mine. I'm rewriting it from the ground up this year.
Ooh, which one is that?
Take Control of Apple Media Apps. Previously, it was Mac Media Apps, and we're adding iOS and iPad OS, iPhone and iPad, and Apple Watch to it. So it's going to cover all the media apps and Apple TV a little bit.
That sounds great, and a lot of work.
It is more work than, well, you know how much work it is for something like that. But yeah, it's a lot of work. All right, that's enough. In our next episode, we need to talk about all these formats on the iPhone, all these image formats.
Yes.
We need to go through that. Because what is JPEG XL? How do I know? What are these things where it lets me choose the focal length of the different cameras? How am I supposed to know what to do? Actually, that might be a whole episode on its own, the focal length. But we're going to do image file formats next time. All right. Until next time, Jeff, have a happy whatever.
Have a happy whatever, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Photoactive. You can find show notes, including any photos we discuss in this episode, at photoactive.co. That's photoactive.co. We couldn't afford the M. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/photoactivecast. That's photoactivecast in one word. You can subscribe to Photoactive in your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts. See the links on our website. And think about leaving us a rating or review in iTunes or in your podcast app.